Most salespeople do not lose because customers say no. They lose because one rejection poisons the next 5 conversations. That's the real cost, not the first no, the emotional residue after the no. A lot of people think sales resilience means becoming thick-skinned, not caring, or forcing positivity. Smile, dial, move on. But that's a shallow understanding, because the goal is not to feel nothing. The goal is to recover your clarity fast enough that the next customer is not paying for the last customer's rejection. That is what professionals do. They are not immune to disappointment. They just reduce the time between emotional impact and intelligent action, and that matters more than most people realize. Because in sales, the market is not only reacting to your product, it is reacting to your state, your tone, your pace, your questions, your tension, your neediness, your patience, your ability to stay precise under pressure. If one bad call changes your state, then that one bad call is not one bad call anymore. It becomes a multiplier. A lot of salespeople misunderstand this. They think the problem is rejection itself. It's usually not. The problem is the interpretation of rejection. They hear "not interested," and their brain translates it into something much bigger. My pitch is weak. My offer is weak. I'm weak. This market is terrible. Nobody wants this. I'm not cut out for this. That leap is where most damage happens. And once that happens, they stop selling and start self-protecting. They talk too much, or they become passive, or they lower their standards, or they discount too early, or they chase low-quality prospects just to feel movement, or they delay the next outreach because they want to get in the right mindset. That last one is especially dangerous, because in creative work, in learning, and in sales, waiting for the right feeling usually destroys momentum. Flow does not appear because you felt confident first. Very often, confidence appears because you re-entered the task cleanly and stayed with it long enough for your mind to organize itself. Action calls the feeling, not the other way around. So here's the real point. In sales, your edge is not that rejection hurts less. Your edge is that you can turn rejection from identity threat back into usable data and do it fast. That is the skill, not fake confidence. Not motivational talk, not emotional suppression, recovery spade. Now let's talk about why this is true at the level of mechanism, not slogans. When a prospect rejects you, your brain does not process it as a neutral business event. At a biological level, rejection carries a social threat signal. That matters because the human nervous system evolved in groups. For most of human history, loss of status, exclusion, or disapproval was not just emotionally unpleasant. It could become a survival issue. So your brain is biased to take social rejection seriously, often more seriously than the actual business consequences justify. This is why a simple sales rejection can feel larger than it is. Your threat system activates. The amygdala, which is basically part of the brain's fast alarm network, becomes more active. Stress chemistry rises. Attention narrows. Your body prepares to defend, withdraw, or overcompensate. At exactly that moment, the part of the brain you need most in sales, the prefrontal cortex, the system responsible for judgment, language control, impulse regulation, and strategic thinking, becomes less efficient. That's why after rejection people often do one of two stupid things. They either get reactive or they get timid. Reactive means they start pushing harder, arguing, explaining too much, trying to win back control. Timid means they stop probing, stop challenging, stop asking clean questions, and start speaking like they're apologizing for existing. Neither one is good. And here's another layer: dopamine. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical. That's too simplistic. A better way to think about it is that dopamine is deeply involved in motivation, anticipation, and reward prediction. Sales is full of prediction. You think this call might convert. You think this meeting is going well. You think the buyer sounds interested. You imagine momentum. Then the no arrives. That creates a reward prediction error. The expected reward does not come. Your brain registers that mismatch. If your mental model is weak, you don't just update the specific situation. You overgeneralize. Your system starts learning the wrong lesson. Instead of learning, this buyer had low urgency, you learn, I'm failing. Instead of learning, I didn't uncover the real decision criteria, you learn, my product is weak. Instead of learning, there was a trust gap, you learn, people don't respect me. That is not analysis. That is emotional overfitting. And once your brain encodes the wrong lesson, your attention system starts helping the wrong story. This is where the RAS, the reticular activating system, becomes useful to understand in plain English. Your brain is constantly filtering reality. It cannot consciously process everything, so it prioritizes what seems relevant. When you are stuck in a rejection story, your attention starts scanning for confirming evidence. Now you notice every delayed email, every neutral face, every objection, every pause on a Zoom call, every small signal that might prove you're losing. So your world starts looking more hostile, not necessarily because it is, but because your attention has been trained to hunt threat. This is also why people talk about attraction in sloppy, mystical ways and get the mechanism wrong. The scientific version is much less magical and much more useful. What you consistently focus on changes what you notice. What you notice changes how you feel. How you feel changes how you behave. How you behave changes what responses you get. And those responses reinforce your original state. That loop feels like fate when it's really attention plus physiology plus behavior. So if rejection puts you into a scarcity state, you don't just feel bad. You literally start seeing fewer options, asking worse questions, hearing buyers through a defensive filter, and broadcasting tension. Then you get worse outcomes and think the market is rejecting you, when part of what happened is that your state made you less effective. That is why recovery speed matters so much. The faster you regulate your nervous system and clean up your interpretation, the faster your judgment comes back online. Now let's move up one level. At the level of mental models, this is not just an emotional problem. It's a thinking problem. Naval has a simple idea that applies here. Play long-term games with long-term people. Salespeople who collapse after rejection are usually trapped in a short-term, single-event psychology. One deal becomes too important. One call becomes too symbolic. One prospect becomes a verdict on their worth. That is fragile. If you're playing a long-term game, a single rejection is data, not destiny. It might still sting, but it does not get to define your identity or your strategy. Naval also talks about judgment and leverage. That matters here too. If you're building real value, real knowledge, a real offer, real trust, real systems, then one person's refusal does not erase the asset. It only tells you something about fit, timing, packaging, pricing, positioning, or trust. That shift is powerful because fragile people take rejection as a statement about self. Strong people take rejection as a statement about friction, and friction can be diagnosed. Then bring in Charlie Munger. Munger's style was never to ask, how do I feel smarter? He asked, how do I avoid being stupid? That is the right question in rejection recovery. Don't ask, how do I never feel bad after a no? Ask, what are the common ways I become irrational after a no? That answer is much more practical. Maybe you rush the next call. Maybe you lower your price too early. Maybe you stop prospecting and hide in CRM work. Maybe you rewrite your whole pitch after one bad meeting. Maybe you attach to one buyer because your pipeline is too thin. Maybe you seek emotional relief instead of diagnostic truth. That is classic Munger territory. Avoid the preventable stupidity. Then there's flow psychology. Most people still think flow is a mood. It's not. Flow is a state that becomes more likely under certain conditions. Clear goals, immediate feedback, manageable challenge, full involvement. Why does that matter after rejection? Because if you sit there waiting to feel better, you stay stuck in self-reference. You are thinking about yourself, your pain, your image, your fear. But if you re-enter a clear task, review the call, classify the objection, rewrite one question, send the follow-up, make the next clean outreach, you shift from self-consciousness to task engagement. That is the doorway back into flow, not positive affirmations, not ego repair, task clarity. This is also why I say confidence is misunderstood. Confidence is not, I feel certain I will win. That's fragile because reality will keep violating it. A stronger definition is this: confidence is the ability to stay committed to the work without demanding emotional guarantees from the outcome. That kind of confidence survives rejection because it is not built on being protected from rejection. Now let's bring it back to practical sales. A rejection is rarely just rejection. Usually it belongs to one of a few categories. The buyer did not trust you enough. They did not understand the value clearly enough. The problem was real, but not urgent enough. The timing was wrong. The decision maker wasn't in the room. The switching cost felt too high. The perceived risk of saying yes was larger than the pain of staying the same. Or your execution was weak, wrong framing, weak discovery, poor pacing, low authority, too much feature talk, not enough business consequence. These are very different situations, but when your ego gets hit, you don't classify. You globalize, and globalizing is expensive, because the brain learns through specificity. I'm bad at sales teaches nothing. The buyer never quantified the cost of inaction, and I jumped into demo mode too early teaches something. I handled price before establishing downside risk teaches something. I lost authority because I sounded eager to be liked teaches something. Precise pain is useful. Vague pain is not. That brings us to skill building. If you want to recover faster from rejection, you need to train 3 things separately: state regulation, diagnostic thinking, and fast re-entry. Most people train none of them. They just collect more emotional bruises and call it experience. Experience alone does not improve you. Experienced failure is still failure if the feedback loop is weak. So here is a more serious path. First, train physiological recovery. Right after rejection, do not immediately start narrating your life. Reset your body first. One long exhale. Relax your jaw, drop your shoulders. Stand up if you've been sitting. Loosen your hands. Get your eyes off the screen for a few seconds. If needed, walk for 1 minute. Why? Because your body is often carrying the threat signal before your thoughts fully catch up. If you don't interrupt that physiology, your mind will build a story around the stress chemistry and call it truth. Second, label the event correctly, not dramatically, correctly. Don't say, I blew it. Say, that was a rejection and I feel the hit. Then ask, what exactly was rejected? The offer, the timing, the price, the framing, the trust level, the priority, the channel, or just this specific moment. This question matters because it separates event from identity. Third, classify the rejection. Build categories. Real ones, for example, no pain, no urgency, no trust, no authority, no budget, no clarity, no follow-through. No fit. If you force yourself to put each rejection into a category, 2 good things happen. 1, your brain becomes less emotional and more analytical. 2, patterns start emerging. And once patterns emerge, training becomes possible. Fourth, identify the smallest controllable improvement, not 10 improvements. 1, maybe your opener needs to be tighter. Maybe your discovery questions are too generic. Maybe you're not uncovering consequences. Maybe your close is too soft. Maybe your follow-up has no real reason to reply. Maybe your energy drops after the first objection. Pick 1 variable. This is deliberate practice. Small edge, immediate feedback, repeated reps. Fifth, re-enter action before rumination takes over. This is critical. The longer you wait, the more the rejection fuses with identity. You do not need a full emotional recovery before the next action. You need enough regulation to act intelligently. That's different. This is one of the biggest lies people tell themselves. I'll take the next call when I feel ready. No. If you do that all day, your emotions become the manager and your standards disappear. You need a rule, something like, after a rejection, I reset, classify, note one lesson, and take the next clean action within 2 minutes. That next action might be another call. It might be a follow-up email. It might be reviewing the call recording. It might be rewriting one question, but it must be concrete. Because action is what prevents the emotional hit from becoming identity sediment. Now, very important boundary here. Recovering faster does not mean suppressing the signal. If you keep hearing the same objection over and over, that is not a resilience issue. That is a business issue. If 20 prospects say your offer is unclear, your message is unclear. If 10 enterprise buyers stall at implementation risk, your onboarding story is weak. If every conversation dies at price, maybe value is underdeveloped, or you're talking to the wrong market, or you're handling pricing before strategic value is established. Do not use mental toughness to avoid improving the system. That's ego disguised as grit. Real toughness is being able to face the pattern and change the process. Now let me give you a concrete scene. Assume you're selling a B2B tool to a sales director. You've done the demo, the call seems okay. The buyer says, "This looks interesting, but we already have something in place, and honestly this isn't a priority right now." A weak seller hears rejection. A strong seller hears at least 3 possible mechanisms. We don't want switching cost. We don't trust adoption will be easy. This problem is not expensive enough yet to move to the top of the list. Those are very different. If you take it personally, your next move gets worse. Maybe you over-explain. Maybe you discount. Maybe you send a desperate follow-up. Maybe you leave the call thinking your solution isn't valuable. But if you stay analytical, the next move changes. You might say calmly, "That makes sense." Usually when teams say not a priority, it means one of 3 things. The current system is good enough, the cost of changing feels too high, or the problem isn't hurting enough yet. Which one is most true on your side? Now you're not begging, you're diagnosing. That is sales, not manipulation. Diagnosis, because the real job in sales is not to pressure people into saying yes. It is to help them think clearly enough to lower unnecessary decision resistance. And when the answer is still no, you leave with information, not ego damage. Here's another scene. You're making outbound calls. On the first call of the morning, the prospect cuts you off in 20 seconds. Not interested. You feel the sting. If you do nothing, that state carries. On the second call, your voice is flatter. On the third call, you rush your opening. On the fourth, you stop asking follow-up questions because you don't want another shutdown. By noon, you tell yourself, nobody wants this. But that conclusion was contaminated. It wasn't the market. It was emotional carryover. Now compare that with a trained response. You take the hit, one breath, relax your face. Note: low patience, not enough pattern interrupt in the opener. Adjust one line, make the next call. That rep is not tougher because they feel less. They are better because they recover faster and preserve decision quality. That difference compounds over weeks and months. This is why I like measuring what I call your recovery half-life. In chemistry, half-life is the time it takes for something to reduce by half. In sales, your recovery half-life is the time between a rejection and the moment you can engage the next opportunity without emotional contamination. For some people, it's 30 minutes. For some, it's half a day. For some, it's 3 days if the deal was large. That is not just personality. It is trainable. And if you reduce that half-life, your output changes dramatically even if nothing else changes. More clean conversations. More consistent tone. More stable follow-up. Less self-sabotage. Better learning. So how do you deliberately train this? Start with a post-rejection template. Every time you get rejected, answer 5 questions. What exactly happened? What did I feel in the first 30 seconds? What category of rejection was this? What part was outside my control? What is one thing I will test next time? Keep it short. No essays. No emotional novels. Then once a week, review the patterns. If most of your rejections are no urgency, your problem is probably not objection handling. It's discovery and problem amplification. If most are no trust, your problem may be authority, proof, specificity, or understanding the buyer's world. If most are ghosting after interest, your problem may be weak next step design, low perceived risk reduction, or poor stakeholder mapping. This is how rejection becomes curriculum. Then add deliberate practice. Pick the category that hurts you most and rehearse it, not vaguely, specifically. If price rejection throws you off, practice the pricing conversation 20 times. If dismissal in the first 15 seconds kills your energy, rehearse short openers and pattern interrupts. If procurement conversations make you defensive, role-play them until your nervous system stops treating them as attack. This is where tools can help: call recordings, AI practice, peer role-play, manager review. But the principle stays the same. Isolate the weakness, repeat with feedback, tighten the response. And remember something important from skill acquisition. You do need to raise your floor, but you also need to sharpen your edge. If your weakness is so bad that it destroys deals early, fix it. But once the floor is stable, double down on your signature strength. Maybe your strength is insight. Maybe it's calm authority. Maybe it's listening. Maybe it's strategic follow-up. Maybe it's helping buyers think through risk. Elite performance is not built by becoming average at everything. It's built by removing the critical weaknesses and then making your strengths unmistakable. Also, don't ignore biology. A dysregulated body creates a dysregulated sales mind. Poor sleep makes your emotional control worse. Low movement makes stress stick longer in the body. Constant digital distraction weakens deep focus. Too much caffeine with too little recovery can make your anxiety look like urgency. Then you think the prospect is hard. Sometimes your nervous system is just overreactive. People want psychological tools while ignoring physical state. That never works for long. If your body is under chronic stress, your amygdala fires faster, your patience shrinks, and your interpretation gets darker. Then normal sales friction feels like existential threat. So yes, mindset matters, but mindset sitting on top of bad physiology is unstable. Now there's a deeper lesson here beyond sales. Rejection recovery is really about identity structure. If your identity depends on immediate approval, sales will break you. Actually, entrepreneurship, creativity, and public expression will break you too. Because in all those arenas, the world gives delayed, uneven, often ambiguous feedback. Some people will misunderstand you, some will ignore you, some will reject the offer for reasons that have nothing to do with value. Some will like you and still not buy because the timing is wrong. Some will buy later, not now. Some are simply not your market. If you don't understand that, you waste years trying to become emotionally invulnerable. That's the wrong goal. The right goal is to become structurally resilient, meaning you can feel the hit without becoming the hit. You can take in the data without swallowing the verdict. You can adjust the process without insulting yourself. You can keep moving without pretending you are unbothered. That is mature confidence. And that maturity changes the way you sell. You stop chasing low-quality yesies just to soothe your ego. You stop over-explaining to uninterested people. You stop trying to be accepted by the wrong market. You stop performing for approval and start building credibility where your value is actually legible. That matters especially in B2B and high-trust sales. Serious buyers are not looking for emotional volatility wrapped in enthusiasm. They are looking for signal, clarity, judgment, composure, business understanding, and the ability to reduce uncertainty. When you recover quickly from rejection, you are not just protecting your mood, you are becoming more credible. Now, if you want something concrete, here's what to do. Today, build a simple rejection log. Use a notes app, spreadsheet, or CRM tag. Every no gets classified. No drama, just categories. Today, also define your reset protocol. Keep it under 90 seconds. Exhale, relax body, name the hit. Classify the rejection. Write one learning. Take one next action. Tomorrow, review one lost call or one lost email thread. Not to shame yourself, to find the real friction. Where did trust drop? Where did clarity drop? Where did urgency stay weak? Where did you speak too early? Where did you fail to understand the buyer's decision process? This week, pick your top 3 rejection patterns and train them deliberately. Record your practice if you can. Listen for pace, tone, precision, and emotional leakage. If you have a manager, partner, or AI training tool, use it for repeat reps. Don't just repeat your normal behavior, correct it. Also this week, measure your recovery half-life. How long after a rejection until you can enter the next conversation cleanly? If the answer is too long, don't moralize. Design better recovery. And one more practical standard. Never judge your sales ability off one call, one day, or one deal. Judge it off the quality of your process across a meaningful sample size. That is how adults think in markets. Not with drama, with data. Because the brutal truth is this: the no that damages you most is usually not the one the buyer said. It's the one you repeated to yourself afterward. So recover faster. Not by becoming numb. Not by lying to yourself. Not by pretending every rejection is a lesson from the universe. Recover faster by regulating your state, diagnosing the friction, correcting one variable, and returning to action before the story gets bigger than the reality. That is what top performers do. They do not protect themselves from rejection. They protect their next decision from rejection. And that is why they keep moving while everyone else is still emotionally negotiating with the last no. If this was useful, follow and share your perspective in the comments. And tell me this: what kind of rejection takes you the longest to recover from? Direct no, price objection, ghosting, or not now? And what story do you usually attach to it?